If I know about them, I'll find them and throw them away. It's not a big deal. Ooh, drugs in the house. Ah, wrong.
Charlie Sheen was once untouchable, the highest paid actor on television, making nearly $2 million per episode, living a life of wild excess that seemed to have no limits. But at 59 years old, the tragic fate of Charlie Sheen is almost too painful to comprehend. The man who once commanded Hollywood is now reportedly broke, isolated, ravaged by decades of substance abuse, estranged from almost everyone who ever cared about him, and living a shadow existence that bears no resemblance to the fame and fortune he once enjoyed. What's happened to Charlie isn't just a cautionary tale about addiction and ego. It's a devastating story about how a man can systematically destroy everything good in his life and end up with nothing but regrets and consequences that can never be undone. The current reality of Charlie Sheen's life is heartbreaking in ways that go far beyond the public meltdowns and viral catchphrases that people remember. This isn't about winning or tiger blood. This is about a man in his late 50s dealing with catastrophic health issues, facing financial ruin despite earning hundreds of millions of dollars, watching his children grow up without him, and confronting the reality that he destroyed one of the most successful careers in entertainment history through choices that he can never take back. The peak, when Charlie commanded television. To understand the tragedy, you have to understand how high Charlie climbed before the fall. By the early 2000s, his film career was inconsistent, but then came 2.5 Men in 2003. The CBS sitcom cast Charlie as Charlie Harper, a jingle writer living in a Malibu beach house, drinking heavily, sleeping with countless women, and living without consequences. It was essentially Charlie playing a version of himself, and audiences loved it. The show became a massive hit almost immediately. By its peak seasons, 2.5 Men was consistently the most watched comedy on television, and Charlie's salary grew accordingly. By season 8, he was making around $1.8 to $2 million per episode. Over 8 seasons, Charlie earned an estimated $350 million to $400 million. When you combine his per-episode salary, syndication deals, and back-end participation. He was the highest-paid actor on television, living a life of almost unlimited wealth and fame. But even during his peak success, the warning signs were everywhere. Charlie's personal life was chaotic. Divorces, allegations of domestic violence, arrests, public incidents involving drugs and alcohol. His behavior on set was increasingly erratic. The machine kept running because the show was too profitable to shut down, but cracks were appearing that would eventually destroy everything. The meltdown, how Charlie destroyed his career in real time. The beginning of the end came in early 2011 when Charlie was hospitalized after a 36-hour cocaine and alcohol binge. Production on 2.5 Men was shut down to give Charlie time to address his issues. But instead of getting help or showing any contrition, Charlie decided to go to war with Chuck Lorre, the show's creator. Charlie started giving bizarre radio interviews where he attacked Lorre in profane and personal terms, calling him a contaminated little maggot. He posted rambling videos online that showed someone who appeared to be experiencing a severe manic episode or psychotic break. Then came the catchphrases that would define Charlie's meltdown and turn his self-destruction into internet memes. Charlie talked about having tiger blood, about winning in ways that made no sense, about being a warlock with special powers. What seemed entertaining on the surface was actually a man having a complete mental breakdown, likely triggered by massive amounts of cocaine and alcohol combined with underlying mental health conditions. But instead of getting help, Charlie doubled down. He launched a bizarre Torpedo of Truth tour where he appeared on stage, rambling incoherently to audiences who booed and walked out. In March 2011, CBS and Warner Brothers fired Charlie from 2.5 Men. Charlie responded by suing for $100 million for wrongful termination. The lawsuit eventually settled for $25 million, far less than what Charlie was seeking, and far less than he would have earned if he'd just kept his mouth shut and continued on the show. The firing was catastrophic. He lost his primary source of income, approximately $40 to $50 million per year. He lost his platform and visibility, and he lost his leverage in the industry. No studio or network wanted to work with someone who had proven himself to be that unstable, difficult, and toxic. The HIV disclosure, the revelation that changed everything. The most devastating revelation came in November 2015, when Charlie publicly disclosed that he is HIV positive. Charlie said he'd been diagnosed approximately 4 years earlier, around 2011, the same year as his meltdown, and that he'd kept the diagnosis secret by paying millions of dollars to people who threatened to expose his status. The disclosure immediately raised devastating questions. Had Charlie exposed sexual partners to HIV without informing them of his status? Had he put people's lives at risk through his selfishness and recklessness? The answer, according to multiple women who came forward, was yes. Several women filed lawsuits claiming that Charlie had unprotected sex with them without disclosing that he was HIV positive, potentially exposing them to a life-threatening infection. The legal claims included assault, sexual battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Charlie settled several of these lawsuits for undisclosed amounts, reportedly paying millions. The moral implications were staggering. Charlie had potentially endangered multiple people's lives because he prioritized his own pleasure and ego over their right to informed consent and their safety. This wasn't just about making poor decisions that hurt himself. This was about behavior that potentially gave other people a serious, lifelong disease. The financial devastation, how hundreds of millions disappeared. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of Charlie's tragedy is how he went from earning hundreds of millions of dollars to being essentially broke. By 2016, court documents revealed that Charlie's financial situation had completely collapsed. Despite earning an estimated $350 to $400 million from 2.5 men alone, Charlie had burned through essentially all of it. The money disappeared through multiple channels. First, there was the addiction. Charlie spent millions on cocaine, alcohol, and other drugs over the years. Then there was the lavish lifestyle. Multiple mansions, luxury cars, private jets, expensive jewelry, extravagant parties. The legal settlements consumed enormous amounts. Divorces, lawsuits from women he exposed to HIV, various other legal issues. The child support obligations were particularly crushing. Charlie has 5 children from 3 relationships. At his peak, Charlie was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in combined child support. By 2016, Charlie filed legal documents claiming he could no longer afford his previous obligations. He stated that his monthly income had dropped from approximately $600,000 per month at his peak to around $87,000 per month, while his monthly expenses were still over $100,000. By 2019, reports emerged that Charlie owed the IRS more than $5 million in back taxes. He had additional debts to various creditors totaling millions more. His properties were at risk of foreclosure. The financial devastation wasn't just about poor money management, it was about spending that would have bankrupted almost anyone, combined with income that disappeared when Charlie destroyed his career. The physical devastation, how drugs and disease have destroyed his body. The physical toll that decades of substance abuse and HIV have taken on Charlie's body is another tragic dimension of his current situation. Photos of Charlie from recent years show a man who looks far older than 59, someone who appears worn down and diminished in ways that go beyond normal aging. The cocaine and alcohol abuse over decades has damaged Charlie's body in permanent ways. He's had multiple hospitalizations over the years for drug-related medical emergencies. Friends who've seen him recently describe him as looking gaunt and unhealthy, as having lost the vitality and charisma that once made him a star. There are reports that Charlie's cognitive function has been affected by his years of substance abuse. Heavy cocaine use can cause permanent changes to brain chemistry and function, leading to memory problems, difficulty concentrating, and personality changes. People who've interacted with Charlie in recent years describe moments where he seems confused or has trouble following conversations. The HIV diagnosis adds another layer of health concerns. While modern antiretroviral medications can keep HIV under control, the disease and its treatment still take a toll. Charlie has to take multiple medications daily and deal with their side effects. At 59, Charlie is dealing with health issues that would be challenging for anyone, but they're compounded by decades of self-inflicted damage through drugs and alcohol. The isolation. How Charlie destroyed every relationship that mattered. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Charlie's current situation is how completely alone he is. He's systematically destroyed or damaged almost every meaningful relationship in his life through his addiction, his selfishness, his violence, and his refusal to take responsibility for his behavior. His relationship with his father, Martin Sheen, has been strained for years. Martin, who struggled with his own alcoholism earlier in his career and eventually got sober, has watched his son repeat and exceed his worst behaviors. Martin has spoken publicly about the pain of watching Charlie self-destruct and feeling helpless to stop it. Charlie's relationships with his ex-wives range from hostile to purely transactional. His second marriage to Denise Richards ended in an acrimonious 2006 divorce, where Denise alleged that Charlie had threatened her life, had serious substance abuse issues, and was an unfit father. His third marriage to Brooke Mueller was perhaps the most toxic of all, marked by domestic violence, arrests, restraining orders, and custody battles. Most tragically, Charlie's relationships with his 5 children have been severely damaged by his behavior. His daughters with Denise Richards have had periods of estrangement from Charlie due to his behavior and instability. His twin sons with Brooke Mueller have been caught in the middle of their parents' mutual dysfunction, spending time in foster care when neither Charlie nor Brooke was deemed capable of caring for them. At 59, Charlie is largely alone. Friends who once surrounded him have largely disappeared. He doesn't have a community. He doesn't have genuine friends who care about him. He doesn't have close family relationships. He doesn't have his children's trust or presence in any consistent way. This isolation is the predictable consequence of decades of burning bridges, of treating people badly, of prioritizing drugs and ego over relationships. The end. A life that went tragically wrong. At 59, Charlie Sheen is living out the final act of a tragedy that was entirely of his own making. The man who once commanded $2 million per episode is now forgotten by the industry, estranged from the people who should matter most, dealing with health issues that are consequences of his own choices, and living in circumstances that would have been unimaginable during his peak. The tragic fate of Charlie Sheen is one of Hollywood's most complete cautionary tales. A man who had every advantage, every opportunity, every resource needed to succeed, but who threw it all away through addiction and ego and refusal to change. He could have been remembered as a talented actor with an impressive body of work. Instead, he'll be remembered as the man who earned hundreds of millions and ended up with nothing, who had 5 children but couldn't be a father to them, who had fame and fortune and health and destroyed them all. This is how the story of Charlie Sheen ends, not with applause or accolades, but with isolation and regret, and the knowledge that it didn't have to be this way. The tragedy isn't just about what happened. It's about what could have been prevented, what could have been saved, what could have been different if Charlie had made different choices at any of the countless decision points where he chose destruction over preservation. That's the tragic fate of Charlie Sheen, and it's heartbreaking precisely because it was also preventable, and now it's all too late to change.